Welcome to Skip the Queue, a podcast for people working in or working with visitor attractions. I'm your host, Kelly Molson. In today's episode, I speak with my very first returning guest, Abbigail Ollive, Head of Marketing, Sales and Programming at Castle Howard, the stately home and visitor attraction in North Yorkshire. Abbi takes us on a journey through the seasons at Castle Howard as she explains just what it's like to film a TV production at a visitor attraction. And she shares her advice for other attractions that are thinking about doing the same. If you like what you hear, you can subscribe on all the usual channels by searching Skip the Queue. I am very excited to have Abbigail Ollive back on the podcast today.
To be the first returner. I mustn't have put you off too much first time round.
Well, I think it's more like I didn't put you off because you were episode 6 of season 1, which was all the way back. All the way back in 2019. And I didn't ask people icebreaker questions then. So you might regret this after these. Who knows? First one. What is the strangest or worst gift that you've ever received?
So last Christmas, my partner basically took Christmas as an opportunity to solve anything I'd been moaning about. So my Christmas presents were things like, those little hand warmers, because I'd obviously been complaining that my hands were cold. And I'd been complaining about my drive to work here at Castle Howard in rural North Yorkshire, sometimes being a little bit hairy. So my Christmas present was winter tyres and a 4x4 driving experience to try and, which at the time I was like, I really would have loved, like a baking experience or a pizza making course or something. And I was pretty grumpy about going. But it actually turned out to be a really excellent gift. And I had a fab time on Friday. I feel like I'm qualified now to drive people through a field or, through a stream if they need. And I know how to use my ridiculous rural vehicle. So so I was a bit grumpy about it because I was like, this is, it's very kind, but feels like you really wanted to come and do this.
It's quite thoughtful though, isn't it? That's quite a well thought out gift. He's been listening. He's just interpreted it in a slightly a more original way than you were expecting.
So that sounds very ungrateful, doesn't it? And I did have a fab time, but I have dropped some hints this year about, like, I've decided to complain about different stuff in case that gets resolved in a different way.
I'm running out of
my shoulders are really tense. I think, like a massage might really help me this year.
Like it, yeah. I'm running out of mascara if anyone's listening. Just there's I need some of that on my shopping list. Maybe, spa day would be excellent. My shoulders feel tense too. I like this subtle hint dropping. Right, okay. If you could only listen to one album for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Whenever people ask me like, what's your taste in music? It's just very eclectic. And at the minute I am listening on repeat to Self-Esteem, who I think is just amazing. So I don't know if you're familiar with her. She's called Rebecca. She's from Rotherham, where my dad is from. I don't think many pop stars have come out of Rotherham, South Yorkshire, but give her album a listen. So we saw her at a festival when she was quite up and coming, and she's just done Jules Holland and is now kind of on a bigger tour next year. We booked again to see her. And it's just hugely empowering. And I think for kind of, younger women, teenagers kind of finding their way through what can be quite a complex time, I just think her kind of lyrics and her whole approach to, empowerment is really, really inspiring. So I don't know whether that had been the one I'd listen to forever, but it is on repeat in my car on my journey to work constantly at the moment, and that's my top tip. I think give her a listen.
Excellent. Cool. Did you combine that album with the off-road driving as well at the weekend to give you a little bit of an extra boost?
Maybe empowerment, yes. Women driving through fields.
Yay! Awesome. Good response. Okay, final one. If you could bring back any fashion trend, what would it be?
I think I was meant to be in the 1950s. I think, that kind of Grease styling is, I'd love to just look like that every day, really, if I could get away with it. And if I had time to properly do my hair in rollers and all of that jazz, I think that's the period I'd probably go back to. And I think be quite into that sort of retro 50s, really bright. I like the sort of the bright, vibrant I'd happily drive an American pink Cadillac through the country roads of North Yorkshire.
Yeah. I remember this about you. You're about colour. I do remember this about you when we met in person. You love a colour and you love a patterned dress, an excellently patterned dress.
Yeah, I do, Mac. And I wish I could suit a hat better. Some people, like my brother's always in a very cool hat, but I just don't suit it. I think it's the fringe glasses hat combo is one I can't pull off.
Fringe with a woolly hat is really difficult, isn't it? Because it just pushes it down into your eyes. I'd like to be a hat person as well. I feel like people that wear hats always have a real air of, they just exude confidence. Do you know what I mean? Like, just have that. They walk with confidence. They walk high with a hat on. I'd quite like that too. Yeah. Right, good choices. All right. What about your unpopular opinion, Abby? Because we've never had one of these from you.
No, we haven't, and I'm sure I've got plenty that I could share. I mean, like my initial instinct with this was I would never be upset if I didn't ever hear an Oasis song again, but that's not the one I'm going to go with.
Wow.
I know, yeah. But it's a podcast related one. I thought I'd be topical. So I really hate comedians on podcasts. I just can't be doing with all the trying to be funny and all the chat in between what it is they're actually meant to be talking about. So I love a foodie podcast, but I just want them to cut to the chase, and I want to hear somebody talk about, like, something they're knowledgeable about. And maybe I just don't really like comedians in general, but on a podcast, that's my unpopular opinion.
So do you think it's because they're trying a bit too hard, because that's their job and they're trying to, like if a supplier comes on and they're trying to plug their thing, they're trying to plug their, I'm funny, really?
Yeah, I think it's just like, I was going to try and not name names, but, I'm quite a foodie and I like a foodie podcast. And I think maybe I've realised that actually I want to hear about the food and not all the chat that surrounds it. Okay. So yeah, comedians on podcasts, I'm going to ban them.
All right, good. Oh, glad I'm not funny, or I'd be right out of my ear, wouldn't I? All right,
so we'll
Abby.
have no comedy. We'll just get the questions.
That's it. We're done now. We're done with anything humorous for the rest of the episode. Excellent. Thanks for setting the tone. Right, Abby. Just for our listeners that don't know of you, I'm sure there's not many. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do.
I, at the moment, very fortunate to be kind of running the visitor attraction side of things at Castle Howard. So anybody who hasn't heard of Castle Howard's a stately home in North Yorkshire. It was designed by Sir John Vanbrugh in 1699. So it's a historic house, open as a visitor attraction, but also sits within a 9,000 acre estate. So it's still home to the Howard family. They are, directly my line managers, and Castle Howard's open 364 days a year as an attraction. But I think it's also a really interesting place. So I arrived here knowing that I was coming to be involved in a visitor attraction, but I think maybe, it was more of a pleasant surprise that we're actually foresters and farmers, and we have a holiday park and holiday cottages and a farm shop and a garden centre and kind of all the catering and retail outlets as well. So I think in total it's 9 different businesses, and my role kind of heads up marketing and events and programming and sales, and that kind of visitor experience side of things. So I'm not actually being asked to be responsible for the farming and forestry. You'll be relieved to hear, but it's also just unlocks so many stories that, as a marketeer at heart, I guess is really exciting on a daily basis. And we're not a charity, so all the income generated by footfall and visitors, paying for an admission ticket goes directly into the restoration and heritage of the building and the listed landscape. So I've been here for just over 5 years, so I'm just in the middle of Christmas number 6, so it's a joyous time to be at a place like Castle Howard when it's all decked out for Christmas, and we're welcoming kind of literally thousands of visitors a day over this festive season. So big day today. It's a kind of rainy North Yorkshire midweek day, but we've got 11 coaches here and they're all having a fabulous time. And I've just had a message saying, can someone come and help with the queues in the Bauble Emporium? So that's the kind of thing that can occur on an hourly basis. But yeah, I'm Yorkshire, so I haven't actually moved very far, not deliberately, but just because stuff's come up here, and it's a gorgeous place in the world to be. I've got a little boy, so kind of living in the countryside and having quite an outdoorsy life, really suits us. My background's in theatre, but theatre marketing and comms, so kind of did 10 years in theatre before moving across into visitor attractions, which is just a theatre of a different kind, I think.
It is. It's a show, isn't it? Yeah, you're creating a theatre for people that come and visit. And that leads us a little bit to what we're going to talk about today, really, a show of a slightly different kind. So I think there's been a bit of a run of programmes like this. So I'm talking about programmes like The Secret Life of the Zoo at Chester Zoo, Inside the Zoo, Edinburgh Zoo. There's been quite a lot of zoo-related TV programmes on recently that give you a bit of a snapshot of behind the scenes. I think One Zoo 3 was the other one from Paradise Wildlife Park. But you have been involved in shooting TV programmes for Channel 4, which is called Castle Howard Through the Seasons. Tell us a little bit about what the TV series is, and then tell us what on earth made you decide to be part of a TV programme.
So I suppose dialing back a little bit from the TV show we've just been making this year is, I guess Castle Howard's one of the original screen tourism destinations and has been in some pretty iconic period dramas. It's very well known as Brideshead Revisited, both the 1981 Granada TV show and then the later movie in 2008. And we had our Bridgerton moment. So series 1, episode 6 or episode 6, as most people know it, in Bridgerton, was all filmed here at Castle Howard. And I could definitely, tell you plenty of stories from that few weeks of my life that I'll never forget. But I think we're kind of used to being a location, and Castle Howard plays its own part in a period drama. It's almost a character in its own right. And we've been in plenty of them. And, we've also filmed the Arctic Monkeys music video here from their kind of most recent album. And we've also been played host to an American TV reality show, which was, like I describe it, as kind of Love Island with the Regency twist, which recently someone said should be the name of a cocktail, which I think we're going to have.
Oh, yeah, I think
that was a kind of an American reality TV show. But I think it's the first time then that we've actually considered seriously and gone ahead with us being the subject of what is being filmed. And I think that's the big difference really for us with an observational documentary, or OBDoc as it's known in the business. There were a few things really that made us decide to go ahead with that, and you've mentioned already a couple of those really reassuring series that happened, mostly zoo related, that made us feel like actually there's a real warmth and positivity to how they kind of, they're not trying to stitch you up, they're trying to tell a really positive story about your people and your attraction. And I think that's what's maybe changed over the last few years. So we'd seen Chatsworth go first, really. They opened their doors and did a year in the life at Chatsworth, and that actually ended up being during the pandemic. So it was a very unusual year in the life of Chatsworth, in that a lot of the time it was during lockdown. And but even through that challenging period of time, when we watched it as viewers, we could see that team had really taken a lot of care to tell Chatsworth stories and to be really respectful and positive about the whole estate. And I think that was a huge reassurance for us. I think in the past, I've had loads of filming inquiries over my time here, and we've really avoided the sort of fly on the wall documentaries. I think there's been a general perception and nervousness that they want to stitch you up, and also for me the format only really works if you have the buy-in and the involvement of Nick and Vicky Howard, who are the custodians of this place, and have them kind of authentically involved. And I think they had seen, in years gone by, maybe some not so positive examples, and that had put them off the idea. So I think, we started talking to the ITN team who'd been working with Chatsworth during the pandemic, and it was a real slow burn. So it was about building that relationship and kind of having meetings with them getting to know me and the Howards, and talking really about what the stories were that we wanted to tell. They came to us originally as part of the Christmas series they were doing. So last year, when we had Narnia as our Christmas theme, they made a 4-part series across 4 different houses, and we were one of those. So it was kind of a more intensive Christmas at Castle Howard experience first off, and that's been quite different to then them coming back and being here all year. But I think it's definitely, I'd say, we said we said no quite a lot before eventually we said maybe. And then over the course of like probably a year of meetings and building trust and, you know, really kind of bottoming out what we all want to get out of it, we eventually said yes. And I think, you know, in that time as well, we'd seen things released like A Secret Life at the Zoo. I think our other main concern or nervousness about saying yes was we were sort of waiting for a vintage year at Castle Howard. Like, we knew that, you know, coming out of the pandemic, everything's been challenging and difficult, and we felt like, oh, maybe in next year or in a couple of years' time we'll be doing a really big significant bit of restoration to a monument, or you know, we've got plans to kind of reinstate some of our burnt out rooms after the fire that Castle Howard suffered during the war. So I think we felt like there's going to be a big story to tell, and we better hold off for that moment in Castle Howard's history before we let the TV cameras in. And I think actually, like, you know, what changed that was the pandemic, and thinking, well, actually, in any kind of normal or abnormal year, we have amazing people, we have amazing stories to tell. Sometimes it's those smaller stories of, you know, the truly getting under the skin of the life in a country estate like this that viewers will ultimately kind of really enjoy. So we kind of stopped holding off for that perfect moment and went for it.
It's interesting though, because you're thinking about, I guess, once you agree to go ahead with something like this, you are thinking constantly about how entertaining is this actually going to be? Like, is our day-to-day stuff that goes on all the time, is that enough for people? Are they going to actually tune in and watch it? And, you know, and how is that going to, I guess there's a thought all the time about how we're going to be portrayed and how will that come across. So if you hold out for, okay, this room needs renovation or you know looking after, that gives you a focus that will kind of detract from just some of the normal stuff that would be happening.
We actually started with ITN and Channel 4 in 2020, and we were trying to pull off a Christmas in the middle of COVID, that when the tiering system and all that business came in, we couldn't go ahead, like many attractions and houses. So we started making a TV program about, I was like build on this, you know, I was definitely shown as like head of Saving Christmas, and then we had to cancel it. So we cancelled the whole thing, and we took the difficult decision actually that it wasn't going to be the show we wanted it to be. We mutually agreed really to pull out of that, because we didn't want a show about trying to make a Christmas happen and then, you know, the government saying you're in the wrong tier, you can't open, and a show kind of about how disappointing that was. So we took that decision, and actually that was a gamble at the time, because I thought maybe that would be that done really, but they agreed to come back the following year and make kind of Christmas in Narnia as a documentary. So I think, you know, it's definitely had its ups and downs over quite a period of time. So, you know, again, that build of trust and them getting to know us during the year that didn't I think they saw enough potential to think actually we'll come back and go again. But all of that's really challenging when you know they and us have put budget and resource into a whole period of filming that we then pull the plug on. So
yeah, of course, and you know, by no fault of your own, and actually, you know, there was nothing that you really could do about it, could you? You made the right decision at the time. I guess, like, I just want to step back a little bit, because you said that I can't remember if you said that you were approached by them or if you approached them to talk about it, and how do you kind of work out what the focus of the TV show will be about?
I'd been approached by quite a number of observational documentary companies, and I'd met with quite a few, and it was kind of this exec producer who'd been working with Chatsworth, and, you know, we'd kind of seen a bit of what they'd done at Chatsworth that made us kind of agree and further that conversation with this particular production company, which is ITN for Channel 4. So we've been approached a lot, and kind of, you know, continue to be actually. And I think there's like you said at the beginning, there's a real rise, isn't there, in these sort of observational documentaries at places within the visitor attractions sector. So we didn't actively go out to try and do this. I suppose we were courted and approached, and took a little bit of persuading.
Yeah, and I guess everyone that's going to be part of this has to be really comfortable with being on camera, right? Because they're going to be recording for a whole year at your venue, so you've got to get used to people being around. You've got to be able to run your events around while all this filming's happening as well. So it's not a quick decision to make at all by any means.
No, there's a lot to think about actually, and I think we made sure we'd properly thought about that and kind of met and sort of bashed a lot of that out internally before we started. I think like the things that made us most nervous were around control and editorial control, and kind of how much of that you just have to relinquish, and how much we would be allowed to input into the sort of storytelling and storyboarding. I think there was that, but also the ability for us to resource it. Like you've said, it's no small thing to take on. We're quite a small team. We're still doing everything we need to do in a normal year, pulling off big events and big projects, and having a film crew with you 3 to 4 days a week, kind of every week of pretty much a year, is quite intense. And I think like what we tried to do to overcome that was, before anybody had a camera put in front of them, we tried to do a really good amount of kind of kick-off meetings with all the stakeholders, with the producers. We were really, really clear with them about our ambitions and the key messages we wanted to communicate. By having a year in the life at Castle Howard filmed, it was an opportunity for us to communicate that real conservation aim, and the fact we have a conservation deficit, we're not a charity. It was a really good opportunity for us to communicate where visitors' admission fees go. It's really powerful to actually see somebody restoring a chimney or repainting windows and understand what resource has to go into that, and that's across the board, across the whole estate. So I think sometimes that's hard to communicate actually, with visitors, but having this mass market platform to do that. So we were really, really clear about what we wanted to get out of it, and what actually goes into running a rural estate and managing that in the 21st century, coming out of the pandemic with all the the kind of wider world landscape going on as well around us. So like before, and I think that was really important actually, that we felt respected, and like the TV crew and their producers understood what we wanted to get out of it, and I think that's really helped throughout the whole year, and that they can kind of go, oh, this scene that we're filming now, that really relates and helps tell that story from your objectives. So yeah, that was certainly helpful.
That's great, isn't it? That they're so aligned with your objectives, that they're actually highlighting things that reference back to them as you're shooting. Because you guess sometimes you might think that kind of gets discussed at the top, and then it gets parked, and then we might not think about that again until it gets to editing stage. And by that point, there's so much content. How are they going to really get the message across that we want them to? And I guess that kind of comes back to, comes forward to one of the questions about that content and the editing process, and like how much of that were you involved in as you go through the filming? You've had those initial conversations about objectives, but were there any times where you were where something was happening and they were shooting, and in your head you're watching this thing unfold in front of you going, this cannot go out on telly, and they're really going to want this to go out on telly, and that's not going to happen at all?
That has changed throughout the year. We've all learned a lot as the year has progressed, and like we started very structured, and I planned out like everything to within an inch of its life. So for last Christmas, I kind of diarised everything the film crew were going to be attending, made sure we had pre-meetings with everybody involved, made sure departments were all on board and had key messages and understood like what we were trying to get out of every scene. I pretty much storyboarded the whole episode. And I remember the producer saying to me, like, we don't normally get quite this level of input from, team on the ground. And I think I'm just a bit of a control freak. I was like, I can't have people just wandering around with a camera, because who knows what they'll discover. But actually, like, I think what I quickly discovered is that doesn't always make the best TV, and they're experts. They're really good at what they do. And I just needed to learn to trust that, we were all actually aiming for the same outcome. They weren't trying to kind of sneak around and find stuff that I'd didn't want to be filmed. And actually, as the year's gone on, I think by the time we got to the Christmas episode, which they only left last week and are busy editing that now to turn it round, they knew the Castle Howard team so well, and our team knew the Channel 4 team so well, and are so used to them being around. It just has needed a lot less input from me and my team. They kind of really had a sense of workflows around who's responsible for what. They've felt like an extension of our team as the year has gone on, and we've really built that trust. So I had no issue then with them kind of going off and filming something happening without me being present, because I'd learned to really trust them. But I think like I can't really do this chat without mentioning Peacock Gate, can I? And I think, like,
please.
that's an example really early on where it was a day where on my schedule we were having a historic paint specialist scraping off layers of the paint on Castle Howard's windows to try and discover what the original Vambra colour would be, because we're now in the process of repainting all of the external woodwork which needed doing, and white paint didn't actually exist then, so that's was never the colour that Castle Howard would have been painted on the windows and woodwork. So we had this amazing like guy doing his historical paint scraping, which is what I had the Channel 4 crew focused on, because I thought that would make a very interesting restoration story. And then got the call from like World War III that appeared to be kicking off in the car park, because it was breeding season for our peacocks. We've got about 20 peacocks on the estate. We think there was a male interloper to our peacock gang. I don't know where he came from, but this male peacock was very rowdy and very randy, and was seeing his reflection in cars, so in the visitor car park, any kind of car, especially if it was like a dark colour or blue and was clean. So luckily my car was always very safe. Ever clean. It was seeing its reflection and trying to attack what it thought was a rival peacock. So I've got the kind of person who looks after our security on high alert, trying to basically chase a peacock out of the car park. People very concerned that both staff cars and visitor cars were going to get damaged. So this was all kicking off, and I was like, right, everybody, keep the Channel 4 team focused on the windows. Do not let them come anywhere near what's occurring up here, because I could see like our head gardener running around with what can only be described as a giant butterfly net, like some kind of Victorian explorer, trying to literally catch and net a peacock. Anyway, it escalated really quickly, and the peacock got onto one of our staff cars and smashed in the back windscreen. So it became like actually not that funny quite quickly, because then we were suddenly into like a really difficult scenario with the person involved was very upset, as you can imagine. From an animal welfare point of view, we didn't want to do anything to the peacock that, this is during visitor opening hours. And of course, on the day where we had the Rolls-Royce Society coming on a trip, so we then suddenly had to like pull off people from various parts of the attraction to go and be Rolls-Royce security, and they thought they didn't even notice the peacock, and they thought we were giving them such an amazing service. They were delighted. They couldn't believe the amount of security we have in our car park. So yeah, all this was kicking off, and we had a couple of emergency senior management meetings kind of assembled that day to decide like what ultimately the different options were. And in this meeting we discussed what should we do about the Channel 4 film crew, and everybody's instinct was, well, we're now involved with insurers. The insurers are saying it's a wild animal, so we can't really help you. But we just put on social media in National Gardening Week the week before that the head gardener has names for all the peacocks and has hand reared them, and there was kind of like an insurance argument going on. And we love the peacocks, and visitors absolutely love the peacocks, and they make Castle Howard really unique. So it's really difficult when you've told that story. And it was like Jurassic Park, I'm not joking. It was absolutely carnage. All the peacocks then got wind of the fact that someone was trying to catch one of the crew, and they started like there's a video from like inside the main house which Nick Howard took of them all like lined up on the windows like pecking the glass, and I was thinking they're now going to like actually smash in the windows. They just went feral. But in this meeting we had this big debate then. So this is all like quite unusual, I guess. Maybe not, it's quite unusual, yeah. On a Tuesday in whatever it was, April, May. I brought it up in this meeting. I said, right, what are we going to do about Channel 4? We're not going to be able to keep this secret, really. We have to kind of decide whether it's something we're happy to let them film and cover. It's reality, it's what's going on. And Vicky Howard, to her credit, she said, I think it's going to make excellent TV. I think it's it's the kind of, if you're doing a year in the life at Castle Howard, you want to show some of the slightly more quirky things that go on. And it was reality. It was what was happening. So we made the call to their exec producer and explained what was going on. And then obviously you won't be surprised to hear in episode 1, which was aired week before last, the historic restoration of the windows does not make the cut. But the whole story of like the peacock, which went from like, the sublime to the ridiculous over the next few days, does make the cut. And we've now got peacock merchandise in the gift shop for Christmas, and he's famous.
You've capitalised on every element. Yeah, I love it.
We have. So I think that's a good example. You asked how at the point where we kind of go, I think we need to relinquish control. I can't storyboard this to within an inch of its life. I can't actually control everything I want them to film, and this is going to make great TV. So
God, I mean, it makes great TV, but it also makes a great talk. I'm not going to lie, listeners, I have heard this story before, and I had to go on to speak after Abbi shared this with the room, so you can imagine just how my talk bombed the room. Outdone by a peacock. Thank you.
I didn't think we were doing Secret Life of the Zoo here, but as it turned out,
who knew? It is a brilliant story, and I think what you said is, you just at some point have to relinquish control, because it is going to make good telly, right? And it's a bonkers thing that happened that day. You had no way of. There was no part of planning that was going to happen. It wasn't a normal thing that happens every day. Yes, you've got peacocks, but they don't normally go feral and start smashing up cars. What could have made for a better TV moment than that? Well, I mean, other than Peacock Gate, is there anything else that surprised you about the process of the filming?
Maybe that the people you think are going to be great characters sometimes aren't, and those who are really reluctant to feature and kind of would naturally run a mile if you try to put them in front of a TV camera often make the best TV. I think finding your stars and the really authentic people who are incredibly passionate about what they do, and in a place like Castle Howard, those people around every corner, people who are kind of been working here for 4 generations and have amazing kind of passion and connection with the place, and then those people who have really unusual skills, like my paint specialist, or people who are just doing incredibly niche things. I think it's not hard to find the stories, but I think it was that really there were people who I was trying to navigate the cameras away from, and then there was really willing people who I put myself in that category. I didn't mind at all kind of being on film, but I think I just come across as a Blue Peter presenter, and actually there are funnier, more authentic, lovely people shining through on the series, that we had to kind of coerce a little bit more into being involved, and I think that again, it all comes back to the thing I said earlier about building trust, and our producers had a really good instinct for that. I think they managed really skillfully to get under the skin of the organization, and by sort of relinquishing control a bit and letting them do what they do really well and trusting their judgment, they ended up kind of putting some of our people and scenarios and stories on TV that I definitely wouldn't have storyboarded, I don't think.
Yeah. And I guess we talked about editing and control and stuff and relinquishing that a little bit earlier, but the series is out now, and we'll give everyone the dates and we'll tell them where they can find it in a little while. But did you get the opportunity to watch it before it's been out live for people?
There's a really small team of us who had a low res proof, and we were allowed to, within the contract, check all of the facts and also have an opinion and push back on anything we thought might be reputationally damaging. And actually, we changed a few facts and corrected people on some stuff, but the way, I think we've been really pleased actually with the way in which it was edited, and we haven't pushed back all that much. And I think being able to sort of watch it and absorb it a couple of times before giving the sign off has been a really helpful layer. So I think there were no massive surprises then when it's aired to 1 million people on TV, because there's already been a layer of fact checking, and for me that's about making sure people's job titles are correct or they're referred to in the right way. I don't want someone to have put a lot of time and effort into a filming sequence and then be called the wrong thing or credited in the wrong way. So I had that layer of editorial input, but ultimately what ends up in and what ends up not in is totally up to them. So I think that's I suppose just one of the learnings really, it's about managing people's expectations. So the dog festival we do every year is a good example. You know, we spent a whole weekend and actually the weeks leading up to it covering that as a story, and you know, lots of filming, lots of people kind of being asked to do bits on camera, and the various suppliers and providers we had at that big event, and it didn't make the cut at all. So it's just because they had, you know, if they're here for the whole year, they decide, probably because of the peacock actually, but they decide what kind of flows in terms of their narrative, and we have to just manage people's expectations in that, and kind of, you know, so helpful for me to see it so I can also do that, because I don't want everyone sat at home on a Saturday night watching for their bit and me knowing it's not in there.
Oh God, can you imagine? So you imagine your paint history guy,
exactly,
there, ready for his big moment, and then the peacock takes over. That's an awful.
So I think, like, so internal communication, and just like, you know, I'm sort of spending a lot of time, or have spent a lot of time, persuading people to be involved in filming, and then I have to kind of do the bit of time explaining to people that thanks for like going above and beyond to organise that thing, so we could film it. Actually, it's now not in the show. So, you know, I think one of the other things that it's maybe, I don't know if it's a surprise or not, but Castle Howard and A Year in the Life Here is a microcosm for what's happening in the real world. And one of the other things we discussed quite a bit off camera as a senior team was how much we sugarcoat our narrative and want to look like amazing and brilliant and positive. And in the end, we decided it's better to be really transparent. And you see our senior management team then in meetings with the cameras in the room talking about how visitor numbers haven't been what we forecasted over the summer, and, you know, cost of living crisis, and, you know, the things that are happening in the real world. Because I think the risk is that you know, people would maybe watch this and think, well, you know, they've got no grip on reality and what the challenges are that people are facing. So I think we had to just be very authentic and real, and we did debate that quite a lot, actually, because it's perhaps a slightly more exposing or brave thing to go, well, come into the senior management meeting, we're going to discuss the figures, we're going to discuss the reforecast, this is why we think numbers have perhaps dropped off, this is what we're going to do about it. And I think hopefully that gives viewers the sense of what goes into the kind of running of the business. And you see our, amazingly, they agreed to be filmed. You see our Ukrainian refugee family arriving in an estate cottage next week on the autumn episode, and, you know, it kind of reflects what's happening on the estate here is what's happening in the rest of the world. And like, and unbelievably as well, like, some of it's, like you said, some of it's luck, and you couldn't plan exactly where the cameras were going to be at what point, but they were filming a senior management meeting at the moment where the announcement came through of the Queen's death. So they film the reaction to that as it's happening. And that could have happened, you know, at 10 o'clock at night when nobody was even in the building. So some of it is luck, and, you know, a lot is planned. But it kind of is a reflection, I think, on the mood of the nation and what else is happening in the wider sector and kind of political landscape and everything else. So I think, like, again, like how I approached it was, we've got all these great stories to tell, and this is who I want, you know, in it, and what I want to feature. But actually, as life happens and as the year progressed, you couldn't have planned half the things that have ended up in the show.
No, not at all. But it does give it that authenticity about, like, this is real, this is actually happening, and this is our lives. It's not just a TV show. One thing that struck me actually was when I was watching, there was a moment where one of the senior management team said, look, we just, you know, I think we rule out the fact that overseas visitors are not coming. That's it. We just have to be, that's it, that's happening. And it really made me think back about the last time you came on the podcast, which was in 2019. And when you came on then, it was talking about the love affair that Castle Howard has with China, and the amount of visitors that were driving through from a famous wedding that you'd had at the castle. And I just thought that is a complete and utter contrast, isn't it, to the things that we're now talking about now, and that process and that experience that you've been through to get to this point.
because some of those like foundations that we really relied upon in terms of generating income, like our Chinese market, you know, when that rug's pulled from under you, I think it's made us be maybe a bit more brave and risk taking in grasping opportunities that maybe we wouldn't have done in 2019. And I'd say this filming project is one of those. Kind of, I absolutely put that in the category. We're kind of in a position where you know, we know that those, you know, some of those income streams aren't coming back, so putting ourselves in front of a huge audience and kind of grasping that PR opportunity this year, I think is a direct result of, you know, how the world's changed in the last couple of years.
Yeah, for sure. So reflecting on the experience that you've been through, and it has literally just finished. You said that they're now hastily editing the Christmas episode to go out soon, or winter episode. What advice would you give to other attractions that are thinking, maybe we'll do it, you know, maybe we'll start to have those conversations?
Yeah, hopefully got a few nuggets, and also really happy to talk to anybody who is in the process of, you know, going into this, having now had some lived experience of it. But I think, like, if you're open to filming in the first place, having clear contact details on the website, you know, we, for location filming and obviously this kind of thing as well, we produced a filming brochure, which is a PDF and a physical brochure to kind of sell Castle Howard. So we were like, whilst this observational documentary obviously came to us as an opportunity, we're actively trying to sell ourselves as the filming location. And I think, like, you know, reaching out to, if you've watched a programme and you've really loved it, you know, there's always credits at the end, and you can kind of say, well, that's a really good example of something I'd love to replicate in my own workplace, and kind of tracking down those people and setting up meetings and chats. And I think, you know, as obviously we're part of the Treasure Houses group. There's 10 treasure houses, are privately owned stately homes in the country, and we do a lot as a collective, and we're attending a filming exhibition in London together called Focus in a couple of weeks' time, and kind of as a group making sure we're in those places, meeting the location managers, meeting people in the industry, starting to form those relationships. And, you know, the Christmas series this year that Channel 4 are doing, again, it features 4 of the treasure houses and different ones to last year. So we're a repeat, I guess, in that it's winter for us. It's not necessarily just about Christmas. But then you'll see Blenheim, Holcombe, as well, and Holcombe were kind of going at it second time round, and Harewood for the first time. So, like, we've shared a lot of knowledge and kind of talked a lot really about how we've approached it, and I've been a real advocate for it. So I've encouraged those other houses, sorry, they might hate me for it now, to go for it, because we'd had such a positive experience last year with the team filming Narnia. I've kind of can vouch for the fact that they, you know, they want to work with us, and we're all pulling in the same direction. So, like, I think for us as well, my other bits of advice are maximising the opportunity once it's happened. So making sure SEO's all like working really hard for you, making sure as soon as, like, we had to kind of basically open all those doors to our website, because when 1 million people are watching you on Channel 4 on a Saturday night, like, we didn't want the website crashing. We wanted really clear calls to action about booking for Christmas, booking the cottages and campsite, you know, anything we can sell when there's that opportunity of that many people kind of Googling you. We wanted to make sure we were ready for it. We were also really aware that a lot of the people watching the TV show wouldn't necessarily be in the area or region, and could just, you know, buy an admission ticket. And you know, we hope when the Christmas show goes out on the 3rd of December, it will sell any final tickets remaining, and it certainly did last year. But we've this year decided to do a virtual experience that people can buy, so we'll probably have that on sale, you know, to coordinate with the Christmas TV show going out. So for those people who are overseas, or who, you know, can't get to Castle Howard this Christmas, there'll be a kind of virtual tour, obviously inspired by places like London Transport Museum, who do their hidden London tours, and, you know, with plenty of kind of theatre events do similar, and do it really well. So, and then, like, for us, maximising the press and PR opportunities that come out of the exposure. And I like, and then my other advice is the boring stuff, really. Making sure everything is covered, from insurance and how we protect our assets, like having really clear guidelines for when the film crew's in the house, what they are and aren't permitted to do, like having all those access arrangements and risk assessments all like agreed up front. So, like, there's a leak on the roof, of course the film crew are going to want to be up on the roof at the moment when that happens, and you haven't got time to go through the whole process of doing a risk assessment and, you know, talking about insurance at that point. So it's kind of trying to think about all the scenarios up front and making sure all of that paperwork was done. So that's the boring stuff. And then like communication. You can't over communicate it. I found people get really grumpy if you turn up with a TV crew whilst they're busy in the middle of something highly important or some kind of high risk job, and I'm like, oh, could we film you? Like, it generally doesn't go down brilliantly. So I've been an absolute stuck record in every meeting I've been in this year where I've been asking, can Channel 4 film it? Can Channel 4 film it? Because, you know, and then kind of making sure people are wearing something appropriate. If I know, you know, people are going in to film them, like properly branded uniforms, and you know, just kind of giving people a heads up so they know that it's likely they're doing a thing as part of their day and I'm going to be along with a TV crew. But actually what's happened then is, as the year has progressed, people have come forward more and more with opportunities. So people start letting me know, oh, we're doing nice. Acorn picking was one thing that I would never have known. There was an acorn picking initiative going on in the forestry department. So people are kind of, you know, have been coming forward to me, and I've now got this brilliant content army of people kind of letting me know what's going on in their week ahead, and they're actively thinking all the time, oh, this might make a great story for the TV. So I think, you know, you can't over communicate stuff. And then the final thing, which has been my mantra, it's absolutely obvious, but if you don't say it on camera, they can't put it on TV.
Such simple advice.
You know.
Abbi, I mean, this is going to be one of my favorite podcast episodes ever. You are always so generous with the advice that you give and the support that you give to the sector. So thank you for saying that you will help people and you're happy to talk to them. I think that's really amazing. We will put all of your details in the show notes so people can find out about you. But how do we, if you're not watching it already, how do we find out about the show? Where can we watch it?
Yes, it's called Castle Howard Through the Seasons. It's a Channel 4 production. So it's going out on Saturday nights. But I guess when people are listening to this, more likely you'll be able to catch up with it on All 4. So you'll be able to have a kind of watch on demand. And I'm sure it's something that will get repeated variously across the years because, you know, that's great. You know, they're busy repeating, I think, Chatsworth's documentary at the moment as well. And there's one happening at Highclere. And, you know, I think these things just kind of have quite a long shelf life, actually. So hopefully you'll be able to watch it on demand way into the future. Embarrassingly,
for sure, without a doubt. Abbi, we always ask our guests to share a book with us before they leave, something that they love or something that they've just enjoyed as part of their career or personal. What would you like to share with us?
In my life outside of Castle Howard, I do a lot of baking and cooking, and we have a little family business and cafe. So I'm like a crazy baking lady some nights for that. But I actually, so my it was difficult to choose because I've got like a whole amazing shelf of cookbooks that I use very regularly. But Sabrina Gayer, who has recently released Persiana Every Day, I kind of absolutely love Middle Eastern cooking, and I'm not really sure where this passion came from. But I think like that particular book I've been using a lot recently because they're kind of good, quick recipes. They're really reliable and they're brilliant kind of midweek, not overly complex when you've got your kind of store cupboard of ingredients sorted. But I actually chose this because it's something that, so our Channel 4 producer, who's been with us for a year, Hannah, and I massively bonded over food, and both being foodies. I actually invited Sabrina to our press launch at Castle Howard because she's recently moved to the area. And funnily enough, so I got a DM tweet from Sabrina Gayer saying, oh, you work at Castle Howard. I love Castle Howard. And I was like, oh my God, I mean, I love you. I've got your book and use it all the time. I can't believe you're, you know, trying to befriend me. So I invited her along to the press launch and she came, and Channel 4 Hannah and I had like a proper fangirl moment of just basically going, we really love your recipes. So it felt like a good relevant irrelevant one, although there were plenty I could have chosen.
Oh my God, I am so with you on this. I have all of her books except this one. Maybe I'll enter myself.
Good Christmas present. Good
exactly.
Christmas.
Yeah, there you go. They are the books that I go to if we're having people over for dinner, or like every New Year's Eve. We cook like a feast for the two of us. So it would be three of us now, but we cook an absolute feast, and it's always lamb, and it's always something incredibly delicious from one of her books. And I think I would have fangirled a little bit too.
I know. And she uses our farm shop a lot, obviously, because we have estate tenant farmers, and I think like it's really brilliant to sort of champion that field to fork message. And if you're going to kind of eat meat, it's brilliant that it's local, and it's such a treat for me to be able to have a farm shop on at work where I can get that from. So it's brilliant.
Amazing. All right, well, look, listeners, as ever, if you want to win, if you want to be in with a chance of winning that book, if you go over to our Twitter account and you retweet this episode announcement with "I want Abby's books," book even, you will be in with a chance of winning it. This is the second cookbook that we've had on the podcast recently as well. There's a little trend here. I'm getting a little message.
I mean, the other one that I was close is I was on holiday recently. I read, I'm sure somebody must have recommended it, the Bob Iger book, A Ride of a Lifetime. So he was the CEO of Disney for 15 years. And this week it's just been announced that he's back at Disney after retiring. And so I just not to go on as a prize, but that's for anybody working in visitor attractions, I found it a really inspiring read. And the last paragraph of the last chapter really is kind of his bullet points of, the kind of things he lived by whilst running Disney. And I'm going to do the kind of old school thing where I print it out and stick it on my wall. So that's just a top tip for, the sector. I'm sure most people have read it, and I'm, as usual, 3 years behind.
It's not been recommended though. It definitely has not come up on our, I will check our library list, but I am positive that hasn't come up yet. So, but you can't win that one. It has to be Sabrina, because you will fully appreciate the cookbook. Trust me. Abby, thanks so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a delight, as always, to talk to you. And I do feel so honoured to be second time round.
My absolute pleasure. You're always such a treat when you come on, and I genuinely am so grateful for all the support and advice that you give to people. So thank you.
Thanks for listening to Skip the Queue. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a 5-star review. It really helps others find us. And remember to follow us on Twitter for your chance to win the books that have been mentioned. Skip the Queue is brought to you by Rubber Cheese, a digital agency that builds remarkable systems and websites for attractions that helps them increase their visitor numbers. You can find show notes and transcriptions from this episode and more over on our website, rubbercheese.com/podcast.